Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Port of Houston Appreciation Day. My name is Frances Castanedice, President of the Houston Easton Chamber of Commerce, and it's an honor to welcome you, our customers, our friends, and our supporters of Port Houston to our virtual program. When COVID-19 shut down our city of Houston, it did not shut down Port Houston. These essential men and women worked harder and under bravely kept Houston and our port moving. So especially today, we send our heartfelt appreciation to all of them for keeping food, supplies, and goods needed during this pandemic. We appreciate you all. And if I could clap, the whole room would be clapping for you. We would normally ask our commissioners at this time to stand and allow us to introduce them. However, this year it is virtual, so please help us thank our port commissioners. Port Chairman Rick Campo, who you will hear from shortly. We also have Port Commissioner Clyde Fitzgerald, Port Commissioner Stephen Don Carlos, Port Commissioner Dean Corgi, Port Commissioner Roy Meese, Port Commissioner Wendy Montoya Clunan, and Port Commissioner Cheryl Cruzot. Can you help me give them a big virtual round of applause for all they do in leading our community? The Chamber is proud to work with each of you and are grateful to be a partner in moving the world, driving regional prosperity, and helping the port become America's distribution hub for the next generation. We also wanted to give a huge thank you to Houston Media Source, who is live streaming this program on Comcast Channel 17 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. We also want to thank the East End District, who is allowing us to broadcast this live in their studio. Partnerships are everything, and we are grateful to work with these two organizations. We also wanted to remind everyone that we have a virtual expo going on right now, and it will remain open until 1 o'clock. So if you wish to visit the virtual booth, you will receive a code from each vendor that will give you a chance to win an overnight stay at the Spring Hill Suites in San Antonio. Today would not be possible without our sponsors, and we are very honored to have Platinum sponsor Alan Robb of the International Longshoremen's Association give some opening remarks. So while we're putting that video up, we also wanted to thank our gold sponsors. Our gold sponsors include Anheuser-Busch Silver Eagle Distributors, Cooper Ports America, Dignity Memorial Forest Park Lawndale Funeral Home, Giant Bourbon and Aldecoa Coffee, Houston Pilots, Houston Terminal LLC, Lyondale Vassell, McCarthy Buildings Companies, Port Houston, University of Houston College of Technology, and Valero Houston Refinery. And now we're going to listen to our Platinum sponsor, Alan Robb. Well, we might be having a little technical difficulties here, so we will, when we're ready to play that, we'll come back on here, but we'll also want to thank our silver sponsors and our individual sponsors who have been scrolling on the screen before, and we'll also have that afterwards. And now it's my honor to introduce you to Eloy Cortez and Margaret Kidd. They are the co-chairs of this incredible program. They have worked tirelessly to bring leadership from Houston, Germany, Brazil together with moderator Lori and LaRocco. So we're very honored to welcome Eloy Cortez of the International Longshoremen's Association and our Easton Chamber Board Chair. Eloy?
Thank you, Frances. And it is my honor to serve as chair of the Easton Chamber and co-chair for this program. I would like to take this time to thank the staff of the Easton Chamber, especially Thalia and Diana, who work countless hours behind the scenes. We appreciate your efforts. On behalf of the 2,500 men and women who represent the ILA and work 24 hours a day at Port Houston, we thank Port Houston and the Port Commissioners for keeping our city moving, especially during COVID-19. In addition, I want to thank our chamber members, partners, and steamship lines who are doing their part in keeping our global maritime highway moving. I would like to now introduce you to Margaret Kidd of the University of Houston College of Technology, my co-chair, and who secured an impressive moderator and esteemed panelist for us to hear from today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and please enjoy our program. Margaret?
Thank you, Eloy, and thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Margaret Kidd. serve as this year's co-chair. As we navigate the challenges of a COVID world in our various economies and industries in general, and in the maritime sector in particular, we're reminded of the importance of connectivity, collaboration, adaptability, and innovation. And industries that are going to be agile and able to pivot to a new normal will come out on the winning side of a post-COVID world. I'm very proud to introduce our esteemed panelists today. We have Rick Campo, Chairman of the Port Houston Commission, Louis Sola, Federal Maritime Commission, Lars Greiner from Hamburg Port Consultancy, Vinicius Patel from Porto in Brazil, and Guilherme Caiado, Port Operations Director at Porto Sudeste in Brazil. And finally, LaRocco with CNBC in New York City. Without further ado, I'd like to turn this over, and we're going to show a short video from Representative Lizzie Fletcher, who was not able to join us, but she does have a recorded message. Thank you for joining us.
All right, well, it looks like our videos are not working right now, so we apologize for that, but we will play both videos at the very end of the program. We'll get those lined up. But now we're going to turn it over to our moderator, Lorianne. Welcome, Lorianne.
Hold on. Good morning, how are you?
Hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to turn it over to you and take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It is a great day to be in maritime and logistics. We have a distinguished panel, and Margaret will have the honor of introducing the wonderful individuals that I will be speaking with today. Margaret, I hand off the baton, if you will. Margaret, your mic.
Thank you. Our first guest is Rick Campo, Chairman of the Port Houston Commission.
Okay, let's see if we can get things going here. All right, let me get in the right place here for you guys. Well, welcome to the webinar here. It's always interesting because you never know. There's always things that change, and you can't get it right every time. But you know what? That's part of the game in our new world today. So let me just start by just letting you know that Port Houston and the entire port complex along the Houston Ship Channel continues to be a strong force in the Houston region, the state, and the nation. This year, the team at Port Houston faced the COVID-19 pandemic head on. Team members are working every single day to keep cargo moving and commerce flowing. As I always say, people make things possible. And this is really true during this year in the pandemic, with the pandemic raging. Health and safety are our #1 priority. We began in mid-March to allow our administrative staffs to work remotely, and that continues today. While they may be at home, these essential team members continue to dedicate every day to keeping our business running, our bills paid, and despite all the competing demands of home and family needs. Nearly 2/3 of our Port Houston team report to work on site every day, delivering crucial goods. I'm truly grateful and proud of the work that this team does every day. I'm also very proud of our port police and our port fire departments that provide safety along with the Coast Guard every single day in the port community. While the pandemic triggered a global slowdown in international commerce that began in March, Port Houston's business has actually seen growth in the past couple of months. We surpassed 2 million TEU, the 2 million TEU mark in September. And in October, our container TEUs jumped 15% compared to the same month last year. This growth is phenomenal because when you consider 2019 was a record year for Port Houston and the 18th consecutive year for growth for containers in Port Houston, we are up 11% over 2018 and 2019. We continue to rank 6th in U.S. container ports in America. We are the fastest growing container port in the U.S. among the top 10. Nearly 70% of all containers on the Gulf Coast come right here to Port Houston. Other cargoes like steel, automobiles showed decreases in 2019, but containers continue to be the bread and butter of Port Houston. The Houston Ship Channel is a federal waterway controlled by the Coast Guard and the United States Corps of Army Engineers. Port Houston is the non-federal sponsor of the channel. We partner and support, including expansion and dredging of the channel and channel safety through our port police and fire. Port Houston manages the 8 public docks, including the 2 container terminals. About 200 privately owned docks and terminals that use the Houston Ship Channel make up the greater Port of Houston. One of the biggest and most important initiatives that we have this year and going forward is the Houston Ship Channel expansion, what we call Project 11. Along with our partners, including the U.S. Corps of Army Engineers, this is the 11th expansion of the Houston Ship Channel in the history of the 100 years of the channel. It's vital to maintain the Houston Ship Channel as a economic powerhouse that it is today. And Port Houston is one of the leaders of this project because of the role we play as a steward and advocate of the channel as a non-federal sponsor. We are planning on widening the Houston Ship Channel from 530 feet to 700 feet through the Bay Reach part of Galveston Bay. And a wider channel is a safer channel. And we really appreciate the pilots and the Coast Guard for what they do every day to make our channel safe and to make commerce move and help commerce move. We are going to deepen and widen some segments upstream from the Bay Reach part of the channel and the deepening to 45 feet. Vessels continue to get larger and larger, and the waterway needs to be expanded to accommodate these larger ships. It's all about efficiency and economy, and that's why the ships are going to continue to be larger. I'm sure we'll hear some more about that here in a minute. The environment the environment part of this equation. Our environmental commitment is part of our strategic initiatives, and Port Houston strives to ensure that commerce along the ship channel doesn't have to come to as a major cost of the environment. We have had a long and successful program using dredge material for beneficial use. We work with our partners to help ensure that this latest expansion will provide significant environmental benefits for wildlife, enhanced water quality, and regional air quality. For example, we'll use sand and clay to create 5 bird islands, totaling 20 acres of new foraging and nesting habitat. Portions of the dredge material will also be used to create 3 new marshes of up to 800 acres in total size. Oyster reefs will be removed during the dredging process, and many will repopulate naturally over time as they do during hurricanes and tough weather conditions. We will still mitigate this by building approximately 376 acres of replacement of oyster reef pads in 2 separate locations in Galveston Bay. This is to provide the best habitat for oysters and other animals. Project 11 is also expected to improve regional air quality by increasing the efficiency of vessel movements and reducing potential congestion within the port. At the project completion, we expect an initial 3% reduction in nitric oxides from vessel emissions. These will continue to be reduced incrementally over the next 11 years to reach roughly 7% reduction in NOx annually going forward. Throughout, what this really means is it's all about fewer transit, shorter waiting times, and decreased turnaround times. And we all know that time is money, and time also, the longer a ship waits creates emissions, and hopefully we can actually improve efficiency, which also improves the overall environment. We look forward to, we can also look at volume patterns in our trade lanes to see how consumer are doing, which is pretty interesting. At the start of the pandemic, consumer uncertainty along with Asia production were both down. So that is associated with sort of the double-digit declines that we saw from April to August. Blank sailings or canceled sailings that we witnessed during the summer month were directly attributed to the drop in consumer demand and confidence. But then with the announcement of 16 plus extra loaders on the Trans-Pacific route, this shows that consumer confidence and demand is recovering. There are also supply chain disruptions in terms of shipping products as a result of COVID. In 2019, nearly 2 million tons of food, beverages, medical, pharmaceutical, diapers, and personal care products are imported across Houston's public docks. This year, increases in consumer goods and consumables, furniture, apparel, along with foods and perishables. This is driven by retailers understanding the region's population growth and the need to support delivery of goods and services. There's really no change in the products, with the exception of perhaps an increase in PPE commodities and volume during the beginning of the pandemic. Our normal commodities continue to move with sales volumes, but the timing of the shipments have changed dramatically. Volumes that traditionally would move in July and August for peak season this year are moving in October, November timeframe, and potentially into early December. We've already seen the perishable industries and supply chain infrastructure has been growing even pre-pandemic, but the dynamic we're seeing now is an acceleration of these projects. Due to the pandemic, consumers are not eating at restaurants as much and eat more at home. So many of the investments in the cold supply chain are being accelerated for early completion. This dynamic has also helped our resin exports sustain sustainability volumes. Resins were originally shipped to auto manufacturers for auto parts production and are now being diverted to manufacturers of food packaging and PPE. We're also seeing continued economic development in infrastructure in the form of new packaging facilities to handle resins and other exports. Another interesting development is e-commerce. The pandemic has obviously triggered an increase in e-commerce, and consumers are relying more on online shopping. This new trend or acceleration of the trend is just moving more goods across Houston's public docks. The anticipation of growing imports is helping drive recent constructions of a lot of new distribution facilities around the city. We have, since 2010, there's been 37 buildings ranging from 400,000 square feet to 4 million square feet that have been built. There's about 30 million square feet of single tenant warehouse space that has been put into the market recently. Looking ahead, we can talk about we can't foresee the future, but we can plan for it. So we have spent a fair amount of planning. We just purchased 3 new Neo Panamax electric cranes for the Bayport Container Terminal, capable of handling the 18,000 TEU ships, which are much larger than the ships that call in Port Houston today. This brings our fleet of ship-to-shore cranes to 29. We just approved got a review of our 2040 plan, which is a comprehensive long-range plan that outlines the next 20 years. We're focused on 4 C's: the channel, which is deepening and widening, cargo, making sure we diversify our cargo, and the community. We want to make sure that we're a good partner in the community and that we are focusing on making sure that all of our community partners are doing well in and around the port. And our last C is change, because we know that the world is changing and we have to adapt to the world and that change. And if we don't adapt, then we'll be left behind. So bottom line is our priorities are all about people, infrastructure, stewardship, and partnerships. So with that, I'll end my comments. I just want to thank everybody on the call today. and look forward to hearing the panelists with their discussions. So thank you. So somebody else needs to take over.
There you go. Thank you, Lorianne.
There you go.
You're on mute, Lorianne.
Okay, yeah, I was trying to get off. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Campo. You actually covered most of what I was going to ask you. But if you could do me a favor and put your camera back on, I want to drill down on the October numbers. September, as you touched on, was a very bullish. We've really seen a consolidation, if you will, of trade because of COVID-19. The October numbers were huge, jumped over 15% compared to October of 2019. A lot of TEUs went through. I'm all about that. Trade is a forward-looking indicator on the health of the economy of a country, as well as the consumer. What I did ask your wonderful colleagues at the port was, let's drill down on those containers. Let's see what Houstonians and folks all throughout America are consuming, if you will, through your port. The next chart actually shows some of the material that is coming through your port. Actually, that is the TEUs by volume. Let's see if we have the chart where it shows that linens was #1 in terms of items that were brought into your port. Also saw you have paper, Christmas ornaments, kitchenware. I'm sure there's a couple of rolls of toilet paper coming through the port as well. But looking at this, seeing the contraction of trade and this consolidation, how confident are you about the Port of Houston, or rather the reaching the 19th consecutive year of container growth for 2020? I know we're a couple of weeks in with November. Where do we go from here? Do you think you're gonna make it?
Well, you always hope, right? So the good news is that when you think about these items, these are items that people use every single day. And so what happened in this, as you showed in the slides, is that you had this sort of disruption in demand and supply. And so what was happening was inventories were being depleted during the summer, and then all of the whole supply chain has been shifted a couple of months. And so what's happening now is we're trying to catch up. So inventories people are trying to increase inventories to make sure that consumers have goods that they can actually use. So I think that's a really good indicator in consumer demand and for this region. And I think that's part of the equation. So right now, if you take through October, we're down 1% in our container business. And if November and December actually look like October and everything shifted, sort of backwards a few months, then hopefully we will beat our 2019 container numbers. It looks like that goal is in sight, unless something dramatically falls off, in November, December. But it is about consumers buying. And when you think about the region, our region in Texas and in Houston specifically, and we'll compare, I'll do a little juxtaposition between the West Coast. So in Houston, we lost about 320,000 jobs, and we have added back more than half of those jobs. And if you look at LA, for example, they've added about 6% of their jobs back that they lost. So our economy is coming back much quicker than the West Coast and the East Coast. A lot of that has to do with the opening and just the growth in the economy and sort of the governors and our civic leaders' response to the pandemic, but relative to what was happening on the East Coast and the West Coast. So I think that we do have a shot at beating the 2019 numbers, and I hope we do.
You brought up COVID-19. The state of Texas, as you know, is now over 1 million cases of confirmed COVID-19. You have lockdowns overseas, over in Europe. Port Houston, as you know, they export all over the world. When it comes to the flare-ups that we're seeing, are you seeing any tea leaves as it relates to possible consumption pullback or things going out because of these lockdowns and because of the increase of COVID-19?
You know, right now we're not, because when you think about a lot of the supply chain, you know, it's not coming from Europe, it's coming from Asia, and Asia isn't having the same kind of issues that Europe is having. And for us, when you think about, there are markets in Texas that are having issues, like El Paso is where the sort of the biggest you know, concern is right now. But when you look at Houston and our markets here, I mean, we're doing reasonably well. We have pretty low occupancy of ICUs and that sort of thing here. You know, but I got to tell you, we do have to be vigilant. You know, people, and I say this to our Port Houston team every time I get to address them, you know, don't think this is a joke. It's not. We need to be safe. Safety is number one for us. We need to make sure that we wear our masks, that we social distance, that we continue washing hands and keeping our areas sanitized. It really is on each individual to make sure that we don't allow the pandemic to take us over again and shut us down. But we have not seen any major issues at this point.
That's fantastic. You know, one of the points that you did hit on in your presentation was the expansion, the deepening and widening of the Houston Ship Channel. As we all know, the monies for this project are included in the Future of the Water Resources Development Act. Mm-hmm. We all know what's going on in Washington right now. Are you confident that it will pass and President Trump will be able to sign it before year's end?
Well, you know, you never know what's going to happen in Washington, right? So we do know that the good news is that the House and the Senate have both passed their versions of the WRDA bill, and that there are just as many projects in red states as there are in blue states. So it tends to be a nonpartisan bill. And generally speaking, there is a high probability that it will get done during the lame duck administration. If it doesn't, then it's first quarter. It really doesn't change our schedule at all. To the money issue, the good news about Port Houston is that we are not going to the federal government to get initial funds to start the project. As a matter of fact, we've spent nearly $35 million so far in dollars that would otherwise be spent after approval. And we've spent those dollars to fully design the project. So the minute we get approval and then we get an authorization as a start for this project, we can start moving dirt. And so we're thinking that that will probably be sometime at the end of the first quarter or the early second quarter of 2021. And then the funds that will be used in that initial part of the project will be 100% Houston or Port Authority funds, along with some contributions that we expect to come from industry. So we don't have to ask the federal government for funds, which is a really big deal. Because if we did that, we would be in probably a 7 to 8 year cycle to get it funded, and we think we can build the deepening and widening in the next 3 years.
That's fantastic. You know, we had a chart up earlier while we were discussing about the trade partners of the ports. China trade, as we all know, across the board for every port is down because of the trade war. For the Port Houston, it's down nearly 26%. With a new administration coming in, are you hopeful that possibly we might see less trade tensions and maybe some more trade flowing to and from China?
You know, it's hard to say how the trade negotiations will go. Clearly, President-elect Biden is less of an aggressive negotiator when it comes to trade. Not that that's bad. It's just he's just wound differently than the previous administration. So I think it's really important for positive trade policy for our region and for the country overall. And I think that that in a post-COVID environment, people are ready to spend money. When you think about it, if you look at some of the consumer numbers in terms of consumer saving rates, they're off the charts. I mean, people aren't taking vacations; they're saving money. They're not eating out in restaurants. They're buying a lot of stuff, but all the other things that they were doing, they're just banking money. And so the consumer is really flush with capital. And so ultimately, once we get through the pandemic, the consumer is going to be really well positioned to spend, which means they need products just to buy, right? So that means cargo needs to flow, and our docks at Port Houston are going to be, doing really well. If you look at autos, they've been down a lot, and people aren't buying as many cars, but I think that will change in a post-COVID environment. So that should increase as well. And the same thing with energy. When energy prices are up a bit, and we're starting to drill more, wells, and I think that's a big part of the break bulk business that we have, along with steel that gets imported. So I think that will be better in 21 as well. So with all that, it should be a pretty positive environment in 2021, both for trade, whether the administration, depending on policy there, but still with consumers having big money in their pocket, I think it's going to be a great 2021.
Yeah, with all indications, with what we're seeing with the TEUs flowing, and as well as the commodities that are going in and out, it definitely shows a lot of bullish indicators. Mm-hmm. One of the things that makes Port Houston so special and gives that competitive advantage is the working relationship the port has with the ILA, the truckers, and the partners. No question. And that really translates into efficiencies. And for example, I've been covering ports for a while now. And when you're looking at the truck turn times, Port Houston is really, it's unbelievable. The numbers, you're around 48 minutes,
right?
Which is fantastic. Port LA, Long Beach, you're looking at 81 minutes. Mm-hmm. Time is money. And when it comes to this, and I have this great chart from IHS, which shows just how, when you have labor strife and trade flows away, you know for a fact that since 2002, the labor strife that Port LA Long Beach has had, that Port Houston and all the other Gulf ports have been major beneficiaries of this. Are you seeing any additional trade flowing now that was originally destined, say, to the West Coast, but is now coming here because you're moving product? They have ships out towards the proverbial horizon.
Absolutely, and if we wouldn't be the fastest growing port in the top 10 ports if it wasn't for that, right? And that is, we're very efficient. Our actual time on our trucks is down to 40 minutes now, and part of that is about investing in technology, investing in training, and really having great partners. Like the ILA is an amazing partner, and they are partners. They're true partners. There's not a sort of a rift between sort of management and labor at all, because we really support our labor, and we treat them like they're our partners, and that they are. And so at the end of the day, it's sort of the Texas way and the Houston way when you get down to it. And I gave you that sort of juxtaposition on Los Angeles jobs versus Houston jobs, right? There's a reason they've only added 6% of their jobs back, and that's because of public policy that's dictated by the state and the local governments. Let me give you I'm in the apartment business in my day job, and it's a really interesting number as well, because it gives you that same sense of Texas can do, and Houston can do, Port Houston can do, with the fact that we have these great relationships with labor, and we have a low cost environment, and we invest heavily in our technology. In my apartment business, our delinquencies in Houston are about 0.5%. In LA, they're 11%.
Yep.
Right. And the reason they're 11% is people haven't got their jobs back, and the government is just so difficult and makes it so hard to do business there. You talk about a double the wait time in terms of truck wait times in LA, and I guarantee you it's government regulation. And think about those trucks sitting there with smokestacks pumping, smoke and emissions into the environment. And here you can come into Houston and get it done half the time. So we're much more efficient from an environmental perspective. And so it's kind of a strange, juxtaposition when you think about California and their regulations. Even though they're so green, some of these regulations cost them their greenness in causing their trucks to be that long. To stay that long. And we know that cargo flows like water. It wants the most efficient, cheapest, most cost-effective way to get the product to the consumer. And we at Port Houston and the entire Gulf Coast is definitely a low-cost provider, and we're going to get more business because of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know if the chamber can put up that chart, but it really is. It is just unbelievable when you see that time frame, that market share, and trade. Once you get trade and you have that relationship, it sticks. It's sticky. It doesn't float back. It doesn't float back unless you give it a reason to. And you touched on it, and it's true. When you're looking at the environment, we all know that when it comes to pollution, ports are predominantly one of those areas where you have a lot of pollution. Because why? Because, like you were pointing out, trucks, you've got, folks are waiting. But in the Port of Houston, because you've got the tight turnaround with the trucks, you also are the first port in the world to make the switch to a 100% renewable electricity. If this was a baseball game, okay, what inning is the Port of Houston in this transformation? And what are the lessons that you've learned? And what advice can you give to other ports in terms of why going green actually adds to the bottom line?
Sure. So I would say we are in the, because this isn't new to us. I mean, we're the first ISO environmental port as well. And bottom line is that we're probably I would say we're in maybe the fourth inning, because there's a lot of maybe the fifth. There's a lot of, and we might go into overtime, multiple extra innings in environment. The reason environmental stewardship is important is not just because of the health benefits and things like that. It's good business. Bottom line, if you look at our 10-year renewable electricity contract, we're saving 10% on our electricity cost annually as well. So it's not about, oh, you do it just so you can polish your environmental star. And being an environmental steward is good business, because you save money, it makes your business more efficient. The faster you turn trucks, the more efficient they are through our terminal, helps the environment, but also helps the trucker and helps the consumer ultimately get a lower price product. And so to me, it's not about being green and having that be expensive, because it really is about saving money at the same time. And so I think that people need to really think about it that way. When you invest in technology, it's not an expense, it's an investment into the future, and that has a whole lot of benefits when you think about it. We're also experimenting with our RTGs and doing hybrid vehicles and things like that. All of our ship-to-shore cranes are, of course, electric. And so when you think about it, it really is just about investing in the future in a very smart way. And I think Port Houston does a really good job. Are we done? Absolutely not. We have to continue to go forward. And we're working on our first sort of ESG report into the community. We're doing a bunch of studies right now on emissions from trucks and what our sort of footprint looks like from that perspective. And then how do we adjust it over the next 5 or 10 years with our long-term plans.
When it comes to ESG, my day job at CNBC, we focus on that. Oh, yeah. And, there are a lot of investment dollars, and it's not just a buzzword. It used to be that ESG was like the buzzword of the day. What are you seeing in terms of both the private and public sector as it relates to ESG investing, particularly with the port and maybe, the trickle down effect, if you will, because the port employs millions of people. I don't think people realize it. The jobs just don't stop at the dock. It's a trickle down effect, right down to the diner that feeds the longshoremen. So can you talk to me a little bit about that ESG investing, maybe what you're seeing, trends, what has you excited as we close the chapter of 2020 and moving into 2021?
So I believe that it is really a huge issue. There's no question about it. And it's been, I think some of the things that happened over the summer, with George Floyd, murder, and that kind of was a tipping point, at least in this cycle of thinking about social responsibility and racial justice and racial inequity and things like that. To me, it gets back to the same issue that I was talking about in the environment. That social justice is good business as well. We need to have a diverse workforce. We need to have a diverse, management team. We need to make sure that we are part of the solution in social justice and not part of the problem. We just are completing a study on our small business program, that we have created a business program over the years, and we've spent about $600 million promoting small business, giving them contracts at the port and creating capacity with those small businesses. We're going to take the next step and say, okay, what do those small businesses look like from a diversity perspective? Are we really taking care of the community when it comes to African American business or Hispanic business or women-owned businesses? And so we are definitely expanding our social aspect that way. We also created a diversity and a group inside diversity. Inclusion, equity, and inclusion. And we have a new committee that is focusing on how do we hire the best and the brightest? Are we doing the right things when it comes to those kind of issues? And I think it's a huge issue. And if you're not thinking about that as an enterprise like the port or a private public company, then you're missing the boat, because the people want to know that you're socially and environmentally conscious and you have good governance structures in your business. And if you don't, they're going to either force you as a entity like the port, people will, or and then in the public company environment, they're going to like sell your stock, right? A lot of people will not buy stock in the public markets today if they don't have good ESG scores. And I think the same thing is going to translate to the public markets or the public entities like Port Houston. So we're all over it.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Campo. You can shut off your camera briefly, but
Okay.
we'll bring you back.
All right.
Let's bring in, please, Commissioner Sola from the FMC. How are you? How you doing?
Fine, thank you, Lorianne. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And let's get right to it. You are the cruise man. So let's talk about cruising. I mean, I don't have to tell you, everyone knows COVID-19 really has impacted the cruise line industry. A lot of folks are waiting to cruise, in January. With the recent surging of COVID-19 cases here in the United States, what can you tell us in terms of your communication with the ports? In terms of their preparations, if you will, for returning to cruise?
Sure. Well, 2020 has been like no other year for the Federal Maritime Commission. We have two fact-finding investigations going on at the same time. One on detention and demurrage with my esteemed colleague, Rebecca Dye, and then I was tasked to lead the fact-finding 30, which is in charge of cruise industry and the economic impacts of that. So the first thing that we did is we looked at the bonding on the cruise ship. So each cruise ship has a bonding, and we went ahead and we adjusted that. I would say more for the US flag carriers out of Alaska, because they're missing their entire season. So we were able to give them some sort of relief. The second part of our fact-finding investigation is we looked at the cruise ticket refund. And it was across the board. It was so diverse that you couldn't really imagine. So what we did is we recommended making changes to this for the first time to the Passenger Vessel Act since 1881. And my fellow commissioners passed it 5-0, so that we have a standardization for ticket refund policies to give the people who are buying the tickets to feel good. If they're not comfortable going on a cruise, or can they get their money back, or can they make changes? So what we did is we're going to standardize that across the board. The third part of the fact-finding 30 is why I'm here in Texas. And let me take my hat off to Eloy Cortez and Margaret, who I haven't seen, but I believe has a magic wand somewhere, who knew I was in Texas and brought me to Houston. And I'm very happy to be here. Is we're looking at the economic impacts. So we just finished Florida. We just finished Alaska, and now we're looking at the Gulf. So to give you an idea, it's probably about $45 billion in lost economic impact from the cruise industry not sailing right now. And this goes, I'm on my way to Galveston, which is the fourth largest cruise port in the country. They were expecting 1.5 to 2 million passengers. So that's 1.5, 2 million passengers that are not parking, that are not eating in restaurants, that are not staying in hotels, etc. So the cruise ports, unlike the Port of Houston, are definitely feeling a dramatic effect.
In terms of the jobs and the consumption, a lot of people don't even realize. I spoke with the Port Miami, over the summer. The consumption itself of the cruise ships themselves, the containers, the food that they bring on, all of that. I mean, there really is that trickle down effect. Can you touch a little bit about that in terms of how the shipping industry, I'm sorry, not shipping, rather, how the cruise industry, the economic spark that the ships themselves and the people themselves inject into the communities?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll give you a personal reference. My son is a senior at the University of Miami, and they've been giving away food. They've been giving away vegetables and other farm-grown produce that was supposed to go to the cruise ships, to the students, and to food banks, because they're not able to sell this to the cruise industry. So they're probably, I think we estimated Miami alone is losing about $5 million a day just on consumer goods going in and out. For each ship that is home ported, goes in there, you could have an average between 10 or 15 containers worth of goods to go on and off of that ship at each time. So there is a large amount of goods that go on and off the ship, especially local goods. And these are, for local produce and local food.
In terms of when you've gone through the different ports, you mentioned, Port Miami, Alaska, can you give us any insight into like quantifying the losses? And I mean, these are losses that cannot be recouped. It's gone. It's gone. Moving forward, what can you tell us in terms of this economic loss and how they're dealing with it, as of right now?
Well, some ports are more diverse than others. If you take Canaveral, which is probably 80 or 90% dependent on cruise, I mean, they really have a loss there. So the unions are not working, the pilots are not working, nobody's working. Alaska, some of the small ports, I mean, some of the small towns like Juneau and some of that are facing 30% unemployment due just basically to cruise. So it's devastating in some areas. In other areas, where they have a little bit more cargo. I believe, cargo this year has been crazy, as you know, because we had the Chinese New Year, we had tariffs, we had coronavirus, and then all of a sudden we went from 0 to 60 like a Tesla, and now we're at all-time record highs. So we're kind of some ports are definitely better than others.
What are the cruise lines communicating with you during this time? Are they afraid because we're seeing the spikes in coronavirus cases? Are they afraid that they'll be suspended beyond January? What kind of discussions are you having?
Sure. Well, we have cruise lines and we have industry and ports. The ports are regulated entities. I would say a little bit more so than the cruise lines. The cruise lines are regulated entities, but I would say that our interest is mainly into the ports to make sure that they are efficient and well established to handle whatever is coming up. We just don't know. We handle commercial aspects. We don't handle the safety. We don't handle the security. We don't handle any of that. But what we do is our reports that we do go directly to the president of the coronavirus task force, which is the vice president of the United States. And also we also send them over to the House and the Senate and to the corresponding members so that they can take that information and they can go ahead and filter that with the information that they're getting from the health individuals. What I can say is what we're kind of focusing on right now is we're visiting each port and we're seeing how the ports are established for let's say a COVID screening, for a COVID quarantine area, for a COVID treatment center. And we want to try to see if we could get that standardized across the country so that the people who are doing cruises are comfortable and they know what they're going to get. Because I think the worst thing that you could have is if you do have an infected person on a cruise ship, not allow that person to come off and leave them on there to infect other people. It's best to get them off. I think that we've seen that we had an overcapacity of hospital beds and other type of things here on land base. So, I think it'd be best to get those people off the ships.
Will the cruise lines be ready to start, say, in February?
I believe what they're going through right now is the new guidelines put out by the CDC, and the CDC put in there a couple stipulations on how they could change. I foresee with the information that came out on the vaccine and the other type of things, and I believe that as we learn more about, I've interviewed hundreds of people getting off cruise ships that had COVID and got treatment, et cetera. And I believe that's all the way back from February. So as we gather more data, we get smarter and we get smarter about this disease. And I believe that we're much better treating it today. And you have a much better chance of surviving today than you do many months ago. And that will continue to get better, especially with some of the treatments and stuff like that coming out. So the cruise lines are very proactive. They're doing their own thing. The industry, the Cruise Lines International Association, has been very proactive, coming up with different protocols. And I would like to say that Europe has been sailing now for a couple months, 2-3 months. And we're also taking the information that they're learning in Europe and implementing that here. So we're not gonna, we get to take a bite at the apple after they've already bit it. So we're learning from them.
That's great. Let's move on to other trade aspects. The FMC has monitored trade levels during the pandemic, speaking with the carriers on the blank sailings and the levels of service just to ensure that the resumption of normal trade. Unfortunately, what we're seeing now across, particularly more on the West Coast ports, but other ports are seeing it. You have carriers like Hapag-Lloyd, and there are other carriers that have suspended the carriage of ag shipments in favor of sending back empty containers to go back to China to fill those containers with Chinese exports. I've been fielding a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, where there's a lot of uproar where people are saying foreign-owned companies are now dictating winners of trade. They're taking China over the US. Is the FMC looking into this? And I send it to you.
Well, I find this very troubling. I believe that the FMC is definitely here for the benefit of importers and exporters. And I think that nothing has been more important to the administration than the exporters, especially agricultural exporters. So absolutely, I believe the FMC has this on their radar. We have 5 different entities within us, and then we also have individual commissioners that are talking directly to the Ag Coalition and stuff like that constantly. I don't know exactly where that is going to go, what the next steps on that are, but I will say that it's being monitored closely.
Okay, any time frame as to when we might see or hear anything?
I believe that's in one of my distinguished colleagues' wheelhouse. So what I'll do is I'll sit back and let them take that out when they're ready for it. But I will say that it is very troublesome to have U.S. exporters of any type, and especially agriculture, being discriminated on not having availability on ships.
Exactly. Another thing that's also happening over on the West Coast, it's come to my attention that the Harbor Trucker Association and the California Trucking Association are going to be sending the FMC a letter about carriers as it relates to the D&D in terms of demurrage and the penalties that they're facing. Do you anticipate the FMC taking action to resolve this longstanding issue? I mean, this has been going on for 5 years, but now with the COVID-19 congestion, with all these containers, a lot of truckers and shippers are really, they're paying through the nose as it relates to these penalties.
They have individual problems over there that are different than anywhere else in the country. And I was over there in February when the coronavirus was probably slowed trade down, and the truckers were having problems getting appointments to return because the terminals were closed. And now just the opposite has happened, but the same result. They're having trouble getting appointments to return because the terminals are open and full. So the net result is the same. We're not, it doesn't seem like we're moving in the right direction on some of these things. I know that some of the carriers have made some leeways that have been very good. And I also like to say that the FMC came out with some emergency relief Because back in February, what we had a lot of goods that were coming in, let's say shoes or clothes or other type of stuff that were going to stores that were closed. So all those containers got piled up on there, and we were able to work with the terminals and work with the ports so that we could give some of the relief on the detention and demurrage. Now it's we're in a completely different new ballgame, but the detention and demurrage interpretive rule that Commissioner Dye put forward, I believe addresses this. It's a very comprehensive document, and the question is now they need to adhere to it. So I think that's where we're at.
Okay, great. At least when it comes to the ports, the CGM cyber attack was another big incident that happened, of course, over this summer. The FMC does have its own digital strategy initiative. When it comes to this pandemic and the amount of attempted cyber attacks, I should say, on ports around the country, what are you seeing, and what proactively can ports do to protect themselves as it relates to protecting themselves from the bad guys?
Well, Lorianne, I'm not a cyber expert, but I will say that we at the FMC have probably the largest shipping economist and database of anybody, because each contract filing is filed with us. So we're collecting information from the shippers on a constant basis, and we have a secure connection. And what we've been promoting is trying to get them to use different APIs so that we can have better integration with the truckers and some of the other strategic partners and the ports and stuff like that, so that we can be more efficient and get some of those turn times down. As far as security, I'm going to leave that. I know that that's actually a question for the people over at the White House, the NSC. They have a ports people that deal with that. So and one of our commissioners is very in tune and working with them. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it to see where we go from there.
When it comes to an API system, one of the biggest problems with digitalization from the ports is the sharing of information coming together. Any pushback as it relates to trying to do something with an API?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say that I believe that we have it in our power to mandate that there is a universal API for a lot of this information. I think it would be beneficial that you don't have to go to 16 different websites to figure out which terminal you're going to return to, or which terminal you're going to pick up from, or where you get your equipment or not. And as all the tariffs and the contracts and everything has to be filed with us, I believe that if they're able to give it to us in a good information, in a usable information thing, they should be able to give that to the users. So if they do have that, then we could pull up different sites, let's say like an Expedia or something like that, where they could pull the information together, and then they could do an easier matching. I've actually talked to different companies that do this, that are I can't think of the word. They data mine the different sites, and then they try to get the systems to line up and stuff like that. And I believe it would just improve efficiencies if we went ahead and mandated.
Exactly. Well, let's end there, and let's fold in everyone. So if everyone can just flip on their screens, or Commissioner Sola, if you need to get a drink of water, since I just had your tongue wagging for a long time, feel free to bop off. That's great. But I'm really excited to bring in the remainder of the guys, because there's so much synergy. And that's why I love maritime so much. And when it comes to the ports, we have Lars, Martin, Greiner, as well as we've got Guilherme, and we also have I'm Vinicius. Hopefully I don't totally butcher your name. Sorry. But let's just get right to it, if it's okay, guys. I know you all have presentations. But I could kind of summarize it if it's okay. I just want to give you guys enough time to play, if that's all right. So let's get right to it. So Lars, we'll start with you. When it comes to Hamburg Port Consulting, your fingerprints are all over the world, okay? When it comes to sustainability, when it comes to digitalization, And when you're looking at the Brazilian ports and even the Port Houston, there really is this massive push, if you will, for a modernization in all different ways. So Lars, tell me, with what you're doing now, I know that, you got honeybees in there. So I did want to ask you, okay, we need to know right now, is HPC going to be making their own honey? And are you going to be selling it?
It's not actually HPC that are doing it at Tyler, but it actually is already for sale. In what we call the Speicherstadt, which is the historical buildings in Hamburg. So it is very much a part of what we're doing, and it's part of the showing how a port can integrate into the community and be part of the community. We're very proud of the fact that the Altenwerder terminal is the first carbon neutral terminal in the world. And we actually achieved that certification at the beginning of this year. So the terminal itself is completely carbon neutral. It is very highly automated, one of the most automated in the world. And we're rolling that technology out to our clients internationally. That said, in terms of automation, sorry, there's difficult English words. It's never a one size fits all. You have to look at what works for what particular areas. And that's a large part of what we do is customizing it. But we very much believe that, as Rick was saying beforehand, its sustainability is actually very financially viable. It's not just a buzzword anymore. It's something that's very real and can actually optimize and help provide a more effective port.
Exactly. It's always it's the last mile, right? We always hear about that, about knowing the last mile in terms of the container. Vinicius, you're really huge in terms of digitalization, and now I can't even say it. I really can now. Darn. You know what, I'm going to say the A word. In terms of where are you in your digitalization journey with the port? Have you issued a global tender or anything? Tell us.
Yeah, we are a young port and we have a lot of technology. So we control all the canal that access the Port of Açu. So we have the first and let's say a very well prepared vessel traffic system. And now we are just we are commissioning the port management information system. So with this, we will be ready for the e-navigation concept. So which is something for here in Latin America that's very important because it's not common. So I would say that we will be very, very well prepared for this. And also we use a lot of technology to control our area. We have a huge area here in Brazil to run our complex. So we have satellite imaging, controlling, and all of these things. So I believe that we are in a good path. We already hired some of the suppliers of these technologies, and we hope by the end of this year, we will be fully prepared for the e-navigation concept.
That's wonderful. Guilherme, can you tell us, I mean, you're also a very good example of automation. Can you walk us through the planning and the thought process of what technologies you invested in? I mean, the port itself, the operations commenced in 2015. I mean, that's pretty darn young.
Yes, it's really young. And when I think at the beginning, all machines were bought abroad. We make deals with Spain, China, Germany. So the machines are automated. And this is the newest iron ore port in Brazil, capable to handle up to 50 million tons. As you may know, Brazil is the largest exporter in terms of iron ore, and we can say that we are a white flag port because the main player in this business here in Brazil is Vale. But we are well located, linked to the efficient railroad that link us to the producers. And that's it. We believe that 2021 we will have all the equipments completely automated, and then our focus will be to handle this iron ore without the necessity to have the operators, and focus on the strong maintenance in order to achieve this high production.
I have this great chart from BIMCO. I hope that the EECOC can get it up there for me. We have seen this year the tremendous appetite China has had on iron ore, on copper, a lengthy list of commodities. We can sit here for the next hour. In terms of looking at the Brazilian infrastructure projects, because you're the last part right before it all goes out. When we're talking about infrastructure here, are they being planned? What can you guys tell us? Can you give us any insight into the domestic Brazilian infrastructure projects that will only enhance your productivity and what you're going to be sending out to China and ports and to other ports unknown?
As you can see, Australia is the biggest competitor when we compare this market against Brazil. But there we have more than 5 big companies playing in this business. Here in Brazil, those numbers are a little bit lower than the real number. We are exporting over 400 million tons, and the name of the game is cost. We are trying to reduce cost to take care about regarding environmental aspects, safety and health. But in the end of the day, we need to reduce costs, and we have here in Brazil one advantage, that is the iron ore grade, the iron grade. So when we talk about the product, we have a rich iron ore comparing to Australia. That's why we can compete in the Chinese markets. And then it's not only the product. We need to compare the freights. We need to compare the chemical parameters, and that's it. It's a challenge, but we believe that in this market we did not see the COVID problems in terms of increasing the market. On the other hand, this market this year growth a little bit.
If I can add something.
Oh yes, please do. I was just going to ask you to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are the same way. So when we consider the capacity that we have in Brazil to export these kind of commodities, actually we had a boost during this coronavirus period because of the currency rate and all of the things that we had. But most part of the tonnage, and that happened here in Açu, we broke records when we were handling iron ore and when we were handling crude oils, and we were also operating our multi-cargo terminal with dry bulk and break bulk. So we, despite all the moment, we could have a very good operations and with a high number of tons handled, and also keeping our people in a safe condition.
And both of you gentlemen can weigh in on this. There's a question mark as to how long Beijing is going to keep the stimulus taps open, and any dialing back for support for the economy that could put in question, if you will, iron ore exports as to how sustainable the current iron ore price is. Do you believe that the price has settled into an equilibrium right now?
May I?
Please.
Okay, so I believe in this market we can see that sometimes the price drop a little bit, but in the long period we can see that the price is stable or going up. So if we return to 2014, we can saw the price, the the index was around $40 per ton, and now it's over $100 per ton, and it is a little bit stable. And this is related to China market. We can see that they are not growing so fast like 10 years ago, but they still in the same level, and they have a lot of space to increase their lifestyle and their necessities. So answer your question, we believe this is a sustainable price.
You know, in terms of Brazil, the country has been an enormous benefactor of trade wars, particularly when you look at the amount of soybean exports, and it continues to grow. You have a trade war brewing right now between China and Australia. I don't have to tell you that infrastructure is so important. And Lars, you could also chime in here as well. You're only as good as the infrastructure that feeds you in there. What are the current potential infrastructure constraints along the interior to the port supply chain? What are you guys looking at? What has you excited in terms of development to make the ports even stronger?
I think that there are two really key areas to that. The first is we're seeing a massive growth in port community systems. A port community system is basically a bunch of ports that are coming together. It's ironic speaking straight after my Brazilian colleagues, and a shout out to the Brazilian chamber here. We're actually doing a port community system across 4 ports, which is something that's quite new for us as well at the moment. So we're actually even seeing multiple ports coming together to develop a community system, and the savings there, you know, as Rick said earlier. The savings there are immense. You're talking in terms of Hamburg, per vessel, we're getting 60, 70 tons of bunker fuel being saved per voyage. We're getting savings in terms of transit times. So those are real savings that are being achieved by coordinating the vessels better. And that just means not just arriving on port, but, you know, when they're leaving one port, you're preparing, you're timing that so that they can slow steam to the next port when necessary. So that's a major area of saving. And then in terms of the landside moves, as you asked, the landside moves, we're seeing very much a process digitalization and automation. So, and that again works towards more efficiencies, works towards a smoothing of the supply chain, allows for a lot of these new technologies that are being developed to start being integrated. You know, when we're talking about drones, when we're talking about the Hyperloop to go to an extreme, those are things that we need to start looking at how they're going to be integrated, and the digitalization allows that to happen more smoothly.
Exactly. And, you know, it's interesting when you talk about investment, and this happens it happens on Wall Street with public versus private. Both ports have the ability to choose their own destiny without answering to shareholders. Can both of you take a few minutes and kind of explain in terms of your investment for the future and where you're able to control your own destiny without having to go say, Mother, may I want to do X, Y, and Z? It really speeds up the process, if you will, in terms of where you want to go. So, Vinicius, would you like to start?
Yeah, I do. I believe just to explain a little bit, we are private ports. It means that we are not state-owned because we have shareholders here in our company. So what makes easier is that we have many procedures to develop a port here in Brazil, considering dredging, considering all the aspects, the regulatory aspects that impacts all the terminals that operate here. So being a private port and a private terminals that we have here, we have the capacity to, in a very fast pace, invest in dredging. We have more than 100 million cubic meters already dredged here in the Sul. So it's a very, very significant amount. And we will be barely done half of this if we were not a private port. So we were able to do that and develop one of the most important terminal for crude oil transshipment here in Brazil. So 25% of the crude oil exported in Brazil is based on a SU, and it's fruit of a total private investment, because we have to drag it to 25 meters depth to receive VLCC. So we operate now with a very large capacity. So we have almost 72 million barrels per year operating this terminal. And we are now on a way to keep this number growing. So we are able to do much more things, but also we receive some responsibilities that were not shared when we are considering in other ports outside Brazil or inside of Brazil, but inside of public areas.
And Guilherme?
Yes, I totally agree with Vinicius. In my case, I am a private port also, but in my side there is a port authority. They are in charge to maintain the channel. But most of the time, the big companies that work together with me, we invest in this maintenance dredging in order to keep the port moving away. Here in Brazil, I believe we have three main business: agriculture, oil, and iron ore. In our case, Vinicius and I, we have the iron ore market. He did start the oil operation in 2016, if I'm not wrong. And Vinicius, I want to tell you that I'm trying to start my oil operation very soon in the upcoming year, 2021. Because here in Brazil, we are blowing up with this production. We will achieve in the next 5 years more than 5 million barrels per day. So we have these big fields called pre-salt, and there is space for other facilities. So if we talk about oil, Sul did invest a few years ago, and we are trying to start this operation in the upcoming year. And talk about agriculture, we can see here in Brazil investments be done from the north to the south in order to support the agriculture growing. So these three business are the key business for Brazil, and I believe the private ports have a strong position and in strong importance when we compare to the public ports here in Brazil.
And we still have some homework to do, trying to make the connection. So we still have to work on railways, we still have to work on highways. So this is a working process that will take us, like Lars said, to a point of connection to ports in somewhere else. So we have some inefficiencies considering the port operations. We have been working very, very hard on that, but also considering the total cost of ownership, we still have some points that we have to increase a lot. And fortunately, we've been working on this in the last years.
Mr. Campo, let's get in here in terms of when we're talking about Brazil and the growth. It's attracted new investments for small refineries. The Houston-based oil group recently announced a $300 million refinery and is studying the implementation of 5 more small refineries in Brazil. Let's try to get in here, guys, in terms of, and I'm going to have you all try to jump in if you can.
Sure.
What I love about this group here is that you really all represent like the puzzle of trade when it comes to the ports, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to management, relations, and infrastructure. The U.S. just inked a deal with Brazil, if you will. It's an infant trade deal. There's so much out there to cover. I would love to hear from all of you guys to play off in terms of how good trade relations sparks investment, and therefore it helps everything from infrastructure to the economies, and really just to the greater good of humanity. So
Sure.
I leave you first.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that good trade, let me make sure if I'm on here, am I? Good.
Yeah,
Yep.
you are.
Okay, good. Yeah, good. When you think about the symbiotic relationship of ports, without all of the ports together, you don't have product shipping in and out. So I think there's a lot of symbiotic relationships, and investments are key. I will take issue with the private port versus public port a little bit. And Houston is probably a unique situation, okay? And the reason it's unique is that we're at the center of the energy world, right? We have 550 million barrels of storage capacity, manufacture substantial amounts of products that are shipped across the world with resin and natural gas products and what have you. The port itself is a public entity, but it's appointed by the city, the county, and the region, and it's managed by 7 port commissioners. The Port of Houston has cash flow annually of between 150 million and 190 million dollars, depending on what's going on. Last week, the Port Commission approved a $239 million capital budget. And so what we can do is invest. We have enough cash flow on our own because of our container business to invest in this infrastructure. Now, unlike public or private shareholders who are starting to look at what's my return on investment, we look at our return on investment as not just pure capital return, but jobs return. How many jobs are we creating? How much tax revenue are we creating for the government, and that sort of thing? And we're able to invest in capacity going forward so that we can have larger ships coming in, and we're going to fund our own, fund a lot of the Project 11 deepen and widening. And what that's going to allow is 1,800 TEU ships to come into Houston. Well, what'll happen then is those 1,800 TEU ships will stop at other ports as well along the Gulf Coast that can handle those ships. So our investments are very different in terms of the way we think about them. We think about the positive effect in the community in addition to the return on our actual capital. And so we can build capacity in advance of the ships coming. So that allows us to do that. And I think we're unique in that way.
And Lars, can you expand on that from your perspective in terms of what you do, how you build it out? You make the connections. You're the guy. We
do, and I just want to touch before I get onto that. I just want to touch very briefly on what Mr. Campo said, because I fully agree with him. Hamburg, HHLA, our parent company, is partially state owned. It's partially private. It's 65% owned by the state of Hamburg, and the rest is floated free stock exchange. And I think if you look historically, shipping and transport was always described, and if you look at the laws books, it's described as an adventure or a mutual adventure. And I think that's very much what it is. It's a mutual adventure, and it's important that the government and private investment both work together for the greater good of the whole community. Coming back to your question, how would we approach it? As I said earlier, every port is unique, and every port is in its own situation, and it's about establishing exactly what the potential of the port is, what the hinterland of the port is, what the development desires are, where they would like to grow. Mr. Campo mentioned, I hope Rick, it was 18,000 TU, not 1,800 TU.
Oh, 18,000,
but anyway,
sorry.
no, don't worry.
18,000.
Yeah. But those, as he says, once you start getting those kind of capacities of economies of scale coming into your ecosystem, it affects the whole ecosystem. So, when we're designing a master plan, we need to look at the whole surrounding area to say, okay, so Port of Houston is going to do this, and other ports will touch on it, but some other ports might be better off downscaling, specializing in other areas. So you have to look at it as an ecosystem and see how the ecosystem best works. Brazil, again, coming back to Brazil, is doing it very well. They have different areas focusing on different things, and there's so much development going on in the whole of South America at the moment. We're also doing work in Chile along similar lines with bulk commodities being exported and looking at autonomous vehicles, optimizing of the supply chain. You have to look at it individually and say, what is the scenario? What are your priorities? Creating jobs. If you don't have the skilled labor, in Germany we've got a shrinking society, so we need to go more automated to make up for the loss of people, to be honest. But then you find new skills for them for those people. So it's an ecosystem that's going to be changing for as long as any of us are in the industry, and it's really for us to move that forward. I mean, what we're seeing right now, particularly, is I think what COVID has achieved. As bad as it is, and as much we talk it negative, it's really been a catalyst and also a starting point for us to start discussions in the greater industry that we haven't had a chance to have. I mean, I'm sure a lot of my colleagues around the table are aware. This year was going to be the slowest year in shipbuilding, whether COVID came or not. And the reason there is ship owners are paralyzed at the moment, not knowing where to go in terms of what fuels. You know, we're doing studies into new types of fuels, and there's so many potential different new fuels. You're looking at ammonia, you're looking at hydrogen, you're looking at methane. LNG is the flavor of the month at the moment. These are all different fuels, and people are actually paralyzed about it. But this, one, the break of COVID, but two, the pressure put on by it, are forcing people to relook at these things and see what works. And what we're finding is it's not a one size fits all. Let's custom make it that's right for the regions, but looking at the whole ecosystem as a whole anyway.
Very briefly, Commissioner Sola, because I'm getting the cane. I'm literally getting the virtual, you've got to stop talking. Very briefly, when you're looking at COVID-19, you're talking about the port ecosystem. What has you excited about lessons learned from this year moving forward?
Well, here in Houston, it's one of the fastest growing places in the country. And I believe that this is a great example on how things can be done right in a lot of different ways. So, I mean, they get along great with their unions, with their trucking. They have a pretty good chassis pool. So they have a lot of things that are, I think, going positive. So they were able to do the smaller type volume, and then they're also able to do the larger type volume. So I think the lessons learned is that we're going to go around and we're going to look and see who did things right and try to cherry pick it and go from there. I hope that answers it.
It does. Listen, gentlemen, thank you so much. We could keep on going for hours, but then, you know, we'd be very thirsty. I'm going to send it over to Margaret, who has some closing remarks. And thank you so much, gentlemen, for being so gracious with your time. I hope you had a good time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorianne.
Thank you, Lorianne.
Wow, Lorianne, this is Frances coming back and thanking everybody you were an amazing moderator. Round of applause. And thank you to our esteemed panelists. All of us working together will definitely keep the international waterways open. So thank you all very, very much. We apologize. We had some technical difficulties earlier with some videos. And now we want to show you a small video from Alan Robb of the International Longshoremen's Association, today's platinum sponsor.
Oh, Alan. Oh. No problem.
Yes, it's not working. So we're going to go ahead and just not show that, but what we're going to do is we're going to air this on our website and on our social media platforms. But thank you again, everybody, for participating in today's program. We look forward to continuing this again. If you'd like to watch this again, this will be on our website and on social media. Please make sure that you share this with everybody out there, and let's work together to keep the maritime highways open. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, Frances. Bye.